So obviously the part we haven't covered in this really is the call queues, which is ultimately the part that's going to allow us to distribute calls either via an auto attendant or directly by giving the call queue its own number. So you don't have, one thing to be aware of, you don't actually have to have an auto attendant. You can just have a call queue with a resource account and a number assigned to it. So you can just call straight through, you get straight into that call queue, and then you'll get through to the people who are on the other end of that. So it just makes the customer experience a little bit neater. But yeah, that is an option. Or you can actually go through an auto attendant and distribute the calls to the queue that way. So this, again, it's all in the same place. The voice section, go to the call queues, click add, and then you can start creating a call queue in here. So these are the options that you've got once you're in there. So you'd name the call queue. Bear in mind that's the queue name that people will see in the Teams client, whatever you name it in there. So it does need to be something that's relatively user friendly. And then it's a little bit different to how auto attendant set up. This is that the resource account is actually assigned at the beginning of the configuration rather than at the end for some reason, but it does the same thing. If you don't have to assign a resource account to a call queue, but if you do assign one, obviously you'll be able to give it a number, a direct number, but you might not want that. You might want all of your calls to come through the auto attendant. You can also then use this next option, which is the assign the calling ID. And what that basically does is it basically allows you to configure the ability to control the dial out number for users. So basically what it'll do is it'll basically say anyone who's a member of this call queue will dial out on this number. So typically people would use the number that the call queue that you're dialing on for the call queue to make sure that when people are dialing out, they're presenting the same number as what people have dialed in on, to stop basically customers potentially calling back and getting individuals who maybe is on another call or not available, and they'll always get back to that call queue. So you can control that at the queue level, but you can control it elsewhere, which we'll show you shortly. So yeah, that's just another example there, just of how the resource account is added. So we've added that. Now we've got that number there. You can see an example of an international number that we can assign. Yeah, okay. So this language setting here is slightly different to the one on the auto attendant. So this language setting is basically defining what you're basically telling the call queue what languages to expect to be spoken into it when people are leaving voicemails, so it knows what language to transcribe the voicemails into. So when you get the voicemails in email, it'll actually transcribe it, so you can look at it and read it rather than necessarily having to listen to the voicemail. But also, like the auto attendant, you have got the ability to assign a greeting as well to the call queues. So you can so it's sort of like a lightweight in some ways, the auto attendant. It's not actually doing any routing, or it doesn't have any sort of opening hours on the call queue. But what you do have is the ability to maybe say, thanks for calling us, please be patient, or contact us on this alternative method, whatever that message is. But you have got the ability to do it directly in a call queue if you don't really have a requirement for an auto attendant. And then obviously you can define your own on hold music as well there. So those are all the sort of the smaller sort of options that you've got with the call queue, but the most important bit is actually delivering calls to individuals so they can be answered. And you've got some quite good options within Teams for this. So the first one is you can actually add it to a channel. So you can basically assign a queue to a channel in Teams, where it'll basically mean anyone who's a member of that channel will then be a member of the call queue and start receiving calls. And the benefit to that is they can actually be self-managed really by the supervisors or the managers of those teams if that's what you wanted in your business. So all the managers in that team would have to do is add someone to a channel, and then they've added them to the queue, and it just means that the business can be much more responsive. They don't need to log cases with your IT team. They can actually self-manage that. They can add and remove people as they please. But the alternative option is if channels aren't necessarily the most appropriate way for you, you can actually assign users directly, literally just select the users in here. But what we recommend mostly, and what we've done for all of our deployments, is assigned the queues to groups. And the reason for that is because when using sort of role-based access control in Office 365, you don't necessarily want all of your administrators to have access to your team's admin center. So by assigning your queue membership to groups, again, as something I mentioned previously, it allows your first line team to add and remove people to groups without necessarily having full access to the team's admin center. So once you've set up the group here, there's no need to go back in here to add and remove people, just add them to the group and they're part of the queue. And then we've got different options on how we deliver calls to users. So I won't go through all of them in detail, but basically you've got different methods of routing. So you've got attendant routing, which basically is the order in which you've listed the users. So if there's whoever's at the top of the, right, sorry, I know that's serial routing, my bad. So what you've got is, first of all, attendant routing, which literally it will just call everyone in the queue. So everyone who's in the queue will get the call, regardless of if they answer the last call. They'll just, everyone will get the call, and basically just whoever answers it takes the call and it'll disappear from everybody else. You've got serial routing, which basically will, that's the option I wanted to mention before, which is that you've got you basically define the list of users that you want to be in the queue, and then you put them in an order in which you want them to receive calls. So the person at the top will always get the call first, regardless of how many they've taken, unless they're unavailable or on the phone, and then the call will go to the next person. But it has got some smart features as well, such as like longest idle. So the person who hasn't took a call in the longest period of time, they'll basically get the next call in the system. So it's got some quite clever options to distribute calls, and it's also got the ability for you to turn on or off the presence-based routing option. So you can basically say whether you want to take in someone's presence into account when you pass them a call from the queue. So do you want to assign calls to people if they're busy? Particularly if maybe they've got stuff in their calendars, because some people, it depends on how people manage the diary. So some people just put reminders in the diary, but they're not necessarily unavailable. So if you switch off presence-based routing, regardless of their presence or their status in Teams, they'll get the call anyway. And also quite a handy feature, again, puts more control in more of the control in the user's hands, is the ability to allow agents to opt out of the queues themselves. Obviously, there's obvious reasons why you wouldn't want that, but it's also can be very useful in smaller teams. So if you've got somebody who sometimes jumps in to help a particular team, if they're struggling with the load or capacity, then people can basically just go into their Teams client, go into the settings, and literally just tick the box to join into that queue, and then they'll start receiving calls in the queue, and they can jump in and out as they please. So there's the option that option there is whether you want them to be able to do that or not. If it's off, then they're always in the queue unless you take them out. And you can configure here how long you want it to actually call a user. So the call agent alert time, how long do you want to actually call a user before it goes to the next one or goes to voicemail. And then you've got what options you've got for overflow handling. So if there's how many calls in the queue before it actually goes to is redirected to voicemail, for example, that's all configured in here. And also underneath that is the maximum amount of time. You can see just there the call timeout handler, the maximum amount of time you want a user or a caller to actually be waiting before you just make a decision and something happens with the call, such as redirecting them to voicemail.